So last time I was with you, I believe on Thursday, we saw one of the questions that St. Paul was answering to the Corinthians. So remember, the context of this letter is that the Corinthians wrote a letter to Paul with some questions and some concerns that they had. So reading 1 Corinthians is kind of like Jeopardy, where we're given the answer, we're given St. Paul's answer, but we don't know what the question is. You know, that's the whole point of Jeopardy. You have to guess what the question is from the answer. And that's what we're doing in 1 Corinthians. We're trying to figure out what it was, because that letter that the Corinthians wrote to Paul is lost in history. We don't have it. So we're trying to figure out, well, what is St. Paul answering to? And so as we look at the first reading, like I said, on Thursday, we saw one of the questions that St. Paul was answering, and that is, St. Paul, with all your talk of chastity and stuff, should we get married? Okay, that was kind of roughly the question that the Corinthians must have asked Paul. You know, is it right to get married? Okay, today's question is very interesting. Okay, very interesting. It actually kind of spans over two chapters. Chapter 8, chapter 9, and then this reading in chapter 10. Okay, here's the situation here. Let me put it to you this way. So within the Corinthians, you have lots of temples and you have a lot of sacrifices that are done to these idol Greek and / Roman gods. Okay, Greek gods probably, because Corinth is in Greece. Okay, so when you do the sacrifice and you do an animal sacrifice, then they take the animal sacrifice, they kind of get a butcher and they butcher it up, you know, and then they sell it at the local marketplace, the local Redner's, local Giant. Okay. And so the Christian, along with all the other Corinth, you know, if they want a steak or some beef or whatever, chicken, whatever it is, they would go to the market and buy these foods that were part of the sacrifice to the idols. And so the question is this: can we partake in this? Is it wrong? In chapter 8, St. Paul gives a pastoral answer. He doesn't give like a commandment. He doesn't give like this is the way it should be. But St. Paul's advice, okay, upon this matter is this. Well, first and foremost, we know, you know, I know that these Greek gods, they don't exist. You know, they're not real. You know, so with that in mind, I have no issue. That is St. Paul, I have no issue with you partaking in the meat. But, here was another issue, but there might be new Christians, young in their faith, who don't understand everything yet. Meaning that if these young Christians see you partake of the meat, they might think that participating in this worship of these idols is okay. And so what St. Paul says is that if you are leading them into sin, if you're leading them into idolatry, then it's better not to partake of it for the salvation of your fellow Christian. You know, for the salvation of their soul, it's better not to partake in it if it's going to lead them into idolatry. And so chapter 9, yesterday's first reading, was about the sacrifice of being a disciple. One has to win the race, you know, to train, the spiritual discipline that sometimes being a disciple, we have to give up these things for the sake of the other. And then in today's first reading, and I'll be really quick in this, St. Paul gives us a Eucharistic theology, okay, based on that question. Because the sacrifice that we do participate in is the Eucharistic sacrifice. As St. Paul says, you know, the bread that we break, is it not a participation in the body of Christ? Notice, again, the strong Eucharistic language there. This is not a symbol. This is not pretend. This is truly partaken in the body of Christ, truly partaken in the blood of Christ. And so what St. Paul says, again, for us, our sacrifice, what we partake, what we share in, okay, again, that word participation in Greek, very strong, meaning that it means like almost like a communion, a fellowship. That as we sacrifice here, again, the one perpetual sacrifice represented to us, which we partake in, we are assumed into the life, the person, the body of Jesus Christ. The communion is established. You know, and so St. Paul says, again, we're directing what? We're directing our young Christians, we're directing ourselves to this one true sacrifice. And at the end, he talks about, when you partake of these idolatry and partake of these practices, if you're not sacrificing to a pagan god, then you're actually giving and sacrificing to what? To a demon. This is why I always caution when I was at Marion, also caution the kids of all these types of new age practices and, stuff, that whatever the trend is today, all this pseudo spirituality stuff. It's like, you got to be careful. You're opening yourself, But for us, we are opening ourselves to what? To the divine life of God right here on this altar. Participating, sharing of the one bread that is truly the one body of Christ. May God bless you.